Good evening, everybody. Welcome to ESTA's Friday night weekly webinar. We're joining you during this entire COVID-19 debacle from our various little holes around the UK. And we're really, really pleased that this week we've got joining us Matthew Coates, who is an expert in finance. He's also the ESTA accountant. We're very lucky to have him. And he's going to be here answering all your questions about how on earth to make ends meet during this difficult time. We're going to be covering a few things, including the self-employment income support scheme, the self-assessment payment on account deferrals, CBILS, which is the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, and the job retention scheme for furloughed employees, where teachers are operating on a 0-hour PAYE contract. We're also going to talk about cyber liability insurance, or cyberability, as I like to call it, which is actually going to be provided by ESTA for you. So Phil will tell us all about that. In fact, maybe we should start with that. Phil, could you just tell us a little bit about that cyber liability insurance?
Yes, well, I'm not going to attempt to try and say it. Now you've mastered it so well. Really, what we need to be careful of is because our work has shifted to the sort of online environment, is that we're not hacked. We're not put in a position where any sensitive information is given away, or that because we have a virus, somebody's hacking us, we therefore then hack all our students' or their parents' accounts. So all I can advise with that is to make sure you're up to date with your very latest software and with your latest browser updates. But to be assured that if something does happen, there is an element of cyber cover within the ESTA membership policy. It's also worth just noting, I think it's a good idea to go through the members area and read through all the long, boring documentation of all the legal and public personal employers liability cover that's there, that's part of your membership. It's a terribly tedious thing to do sometimes, but you'll never have a better time to do it because most of you, like me, will be at home during the day. So it's a good time to get to grips with, to see exactly what the policy offers you. And if there's a question or something you're not quite understanding, then write to us at support@estastrings.org.uk. Or if there's something that you need and it's not there, also let us know that and we can look into it. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks, Phil. So there's, as you all know, many different kinds of musicians and music teachers. A lot of us make our livings through a very portfolio career. And so it's difficult sometimes to navigate which of the government help schemes are going to help us at this particular time. You know, you've got PAYE teachers teaching at schools. We've got private teachers who, you know, self-employed. We've got musicians who play as a living and do some teaching on the side. Some people who do all of the above and are also completely something different as well, taxi drivers, plasterers, all sorts of things. There's a lot of different ways to get your income coming in. And so, Matthew, perhaps we could start you off with a question we've had from Caroline, who says that her income comes in lots of different ways. She's a limited company. She gets money from rent because she's a landlord. She gets money from gigs from playing, but she also teaches, but on a 0 hours contract. She's about 50-50 employed and self-employed. She wants to know, can she take on other work, perhaps in a supermarket? Is this going to have a detrimental effect on the 80% self-employment grant? I mean, it's a bit of a quagmire, really, isn't it, Matthew?
Sure. I mean, with the because she's a limited company, the self-employment income support scheme just simply won't work for her because she's not, for that purpose, self-employed. So the most applicable in her case would be the job retention scheme, where she could furlough herself, get 80% of her salary that's put through PAYE. It sadly doesn't extend to dividends, it's only the salary portion. So provided a salary scheme is in place and a salary is going through, she could claim 80% of that. But on the job retention scheme, if she was an employee, she wouldn't be able to carry out any work for the employer. As a director of an owner-managed business, she can do some work, but only the statutory duties of a director. And you can find more about those on Companies House website. But basically what it means is you can't do any revenue generating work. So in Caroline's case, I know she said that she is continuing to do some teaching and a few bits, but not really bringing in the normal levels of income that she was. So if she's doing any teaching at all, she can't furlough herself under the job retention scheme. So in that case, I don't think that would be suitable for her. So you'd be looking at things like the CBILS, which is the Business Interruption Loan Scheme, to see if she can get a loan to tide her over in the meantime. What was the other scheme that she could look at? There's things like VAT deferral. If she's VAT registered, she might be able to defer a VAT payment that's due very shortly. But really, in terms of limited companies for owner-managed people, sadly, there isn't a great deal of help out there at the moment. But we're hoping that the Chancellor will make some announcements on that soon to see if he can help those people who are kind of slipping through the gaps a bit.
Great. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about this CBILS, could you, about how much we can apply for and who we need to be to apply for it?
Sure. So the CBILS, it's the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. It's like going to your bank and applying for a loan. Now, there has been a lot of problems with this from the moment it was announced, but just today, the Chancellor has announced some relaxation of the rules, which are making it easier for people to borrow. Initially, what it's designed for is for you to go to your bank and apply for a loan to tide your cash flow over during this time of madness, and help you through that. It's like a normal loan, but it has 12 months interest-free payments. So basically the government is stumping up the interest for the first 12 months. And it has what they call favourable terms. Now, they've never really specified what they think is favourable about it, but the government are backing 80% of that loan. They're underwriting it so there's a lot less risk for the banks to take, which means they should lend easier. Now, there have been problems in that if you're borrowing up to £250,000, directors are being asked to put up guarantees, which we didn't understand was going to be the case. They have now relaxed that, so you're not going to be asked to put up a guarantee unless you're borrowing over £250,000, and even then, it's only up to 20% of the outstanding value of the loan. So that's a relaxation of the rule today. If anybody has been and tried to apply for one of these loans and has been unsuccessful because of those rules that have now been relaxed, you can go back to your bank today, tomorrow, whenever, and reapply for a CBILS loan. The other restriction they put on it was that the banks had been told by the Chancellor, if they were able to loan to businesses under normal commercial terms, so in other words, were we not in this situation, if banks would have been prepared to lend under one of their normal loan schemes, they were obliged to do so. But that's another relaxation as of today. They're no longer obliged to do that. So you can go directly to the CBILS and try and get that.
Phil, I think you've got some thoughts there, or you're just waving.
Well, both. Just a quick question, Matthew. When you're applying for this loan as a business, and by that it's just as a self-employed person, not as a company, if you've got at the bank also a savings account, and there's money in that, will the bank hold that against you, or are you still able to proceed with the loan?
So as far as I'm aware, there's no restriction on if you've got money in the business that you're not going to be offered a loan. It's designed to keep your cash flow going and to support you through this period. So I don't believe that if you've got savings that it should go against you in terms of borrowing. If anything, it shows that you've got money and you've got a better lending capability because you can show that you're good with money. So I don't believe that will go against you.
Great, thanks, Matthew. Do send in your questions on the Facebook page here if you have a particular question for Matthew, our accountant, or indeed Steve Bingham, our tech expert, we could even call him. In fact, got a question for you here, Steve. It's a quick webcam question, so we're going slightly away from the money for a minute, or maybe slightly still with the money because it costs. Somebody here, Julie, is looking for a webcam for teaching online, and she's looking at the Logitech for 94 quid. She says there's not many around at the moment. She's a bit late to the party, and of course there's difficulties with delivery and stuff. But she says, do cheaper ones sound okay, or do you get what you pay for?
Sadly, I think a lot of the time it is what you get what you pay for. It's a terrible cliche, but in terms of whether you're trying to add microphones that are better than your built-in device microphone, or webcams that are better than your built-in camera, or if you don't have a built-in camera in the device you're using, it is a little bit basically the more you pay, the more likely you are to get a higher resolution. Obviously, in some ways, the 4K and things like that is irrelevant. If you think about usual sort of screen resolutions and videos that you watch on YouTube, we're talking about usually a codec that's based on something called 1080p resolution, and so you don't need to go for the highest spec for what we're trying to do here. But you do want to I would say there are millions out there. Try and pick a company that you've heard of, and I think probably it's going to be hard to put a figure on this, but I suspect that you don't really want initially to pay more than £100. I would have said. Nicole, you've got some experience in that as well.
Yes, I have just here, in fact, a bit to Blue Peter style. I have my Blue Yeti. I love my Blue Yeti. I'm not sponsored by Blue Yeti, by the way. Some people have asked me. I just love it. But it has the adjustable gain control on the back, and that really helps. So if you can find a USB microphone.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think are any of us using a webcam. I'm using the built-in camera on my iMac.
For the camera, yeah, I'm totally.
For the camera, most devices, a lot of modern devices are going to have a very reasonable camera. I, like Nicole, have got an external microphone here, which is an Apogee mic. I mean, that actually is a much higher quality than I need, because I use it on occasion for portable recording as well. So I mean, they're not a cheap item. There are many more cheaper. I don't know. This one is about £160, I think. What's your Yeti?
It was 120 for the Blue Yeti, but I also, there's the little one here. This fine one was only 30 quid.
Yeah.
So and when it hasn't got an adjustable gain, you can do things like putting it behind the computer, under the table, things like that, to stop it being overwhelmed. But I reckon with the webcam, as long as you can see clearly, and a lot of that's to do with the light. If you've got light not shining into the camera from the window behind you and stuff like that, as long as you can see clearly, then it doesn't need to be high definition, because it's the audio that's important. Yeah. And in fact, we've got a question here from Julie Michelle, who says, and Phil, you can answer this one. What do you do when your student doesn't have internet access at all?
Well, that's quite an easy answer, isn't it? You can't.
Well, I've got some thoughts. What are your thoughts, Phil?
That's a tricky one. I mean, it also, of course, it depends on who the student is, what level they're at, how self-sufficient they are. But the only thing you could possibly do is try and record some tips and hints and sort of provide as much guidance as you can, and then email it to them if it's because their internet access is such that they can take emails, but they can't. They don't have the bandwidth to hold online calls. Other than that,
well, I was thinking, I have actually done lessons down the phone before. Somebody I know very well. Really? Yes, I know what they're doing wrong. I know their right hand thumb isn't bent, for instance, and I can hear, if it's somebody you work with a lot, there is the option to do it down the phone. And are you playing in tune? The bow change is sounding lumpy. Things like that. So I mean, there are ways to keep in touch, and I think so important at the moment is keeping in touch with our students, so that when we come out of this,
I suppose the other thing I would be doing is having fairly lengthy, detailed conversations with the parents to see if you can talk them through some sort of activities that would help keep things going. Maybe point them in the direction of a few sort of books or something. I mean, even if it's just listening to music, even if it's just giving some repertoire guidance, so they're listening to things, or maybe doing some oral tests, or describing some games, so they've got rhythm, pulse, pitch, all that kind of thing. But when it comes to pedagogy, you really need to see the student. So I'm afraid it's no really easy answer to that.
Yeah. Matthew, perhaps we could just quickly go back to you. Somebody's asking about the self-employment income support scheme, saying that they see loads of articles and just have got their head in the sand about it and can't face it. Can you explain it for idiots, please?
Sure. Okay. So self-employed income support scheme, it's the self-employed equivalent of the job retention scheme. So it's meant to be on a par to what people who are employed can get. Major difference between this one and the employee one is that as a self-employed person, you can receive this grant, this funding, and still carry on working, whereas employees must stop work. So what it is 80% of your average monthly profits is what you will get for 3 months. So April, May and June. HMRC will make the assessment for you. So at this stage, you don't need to do anything. But it won't be available until the end of June, as far as I'm aware. They will write to you and tell you you're eligible to make your application. And as far as I'm aware, at this stage, there may be further guidance come out in the next few weeks or month. It'll consist of you just filling out a quick online form and ticking a box to self-certify, if you like, that you have lost income because of COVID-19. And that's quite a crucial criteria. The scheme is to support you if you've lost income. So there are businesses out there who are carrying on and trading as normal. They're not losing income. It's not really affected their business at this stage. They're not going to be eligible. It's for people who have lost income because of COVID-19. But you don't need to do anything at this stage. HMRC will contact you. In terms of what your average monthly profits are, they will take that either, I think, from 18-19 tax return or an average of the previous 3 years. And equally, it's only available to people who are self-employed and earn more than 50% of their income through that self-employment. So if you are employed as well as self-employed, then as long as you're self-employed is the predominant income, you're entitled to claim. And that 50% is worked out, again, based on either the total earnings on your 18-19 tax return or the average of the past 3 years.
Now, I've got a question for all three of you here now. We've had a question come in from Mia, I think it is, who says, what happens if you've already collected money for lessons you can't do? You can't do them because you're at home. Is it better to refund and carry the lessons over to whenever you can do them? Or, yes, is it better to refund, or carry the lessons over? And then the next bit of the question is for Matthew. How will it affect receiving the 80% given by HMRC? So perhaps Phil or Steve, do you want to take the first bit? Should you refund the lessons?
I think that's going to depend a little bit on Matthew's answer, I suspect. Because if you don't refund, but you haven't actually done the lesson, then in the eyes of HMRC, I guess you're not losing that income, so that might mean you're less eligible for that grant. I don't know. That's a slightly difficult one, isn't it? I think.
I think, Steve, that if you can't deliver the lessons you're contracted to do, then you should refund the money.
I think absolutely.
Sorry, Steve.
Sorry, absolutely. I was just thinking, if you are actually just saying we're going to reschedule these, and the parents have said, as I suspect some parents will say, they'll know that people are having a difficult time, and they'll say, well, we don't want the money back. We'll do the lessons at another time. Maybe that's what I was thinking. But,
yeah,
so Matthew, sorry.
I think it's good to give them the option to offer the refund and not hold back on that at all. But if they're happy to reschedule, then it's great. As far as the tax, I'm guessing it's not in the tax year that the HMRC are looking at when they're giving those payments. But Matthew, over to you for that one.
Yeah, there are a few more criteria actually on the self-employment income scheme that I didn't mention that are probably relevant to mention here, but just twofold on that question. First of all, I do teach some music lessons myself, and as an accountant that deals with a lot of different businesses, I've seen a lot of people working on promise, so almost like a voucher scheme. So if you can't go out to your local coffee shop, where you would every Friday go and have your cappuccino and a bit of cake, then what people are doing is asking to buy a voucher from the coffee shop, and then they'll be able to go back when everything gets back to normal and they reopen. So you could apply that to music lessons. You could offer parents the opportunity to keep that lesson banked, if you like, on a voucher, and teach that lesson, maybe do 2 in 1 week come September or something, rather than 1. That's one opportunity. But yes, when it comes to the self-employment income support scheme, you have to have lost income due to COVID-19. So if you're retaining those fees and you retain all your fees, you're not losing income. If you have some parents who come back and say, actually, yes, I'll cancel those lessons, then you are losing fees because of COVID-19. So I would guess under those circumstances, you're okay to make that claim. But the other criteria on that income support is that you have to be self-employed. You have to have been self-employed and submitted a tax return in 1819. And you have to have the intention of trading self-employed in the 2020-2021 tax year. So there are some more criteria there, actually. For anybody who hasn't yet filed their 1819 tax return, first of all, a big slap across the wrists. You should have done that by the 31st of January. If you haven't, the Chancellor has given 4 weeks from the date of his announcement for you to get that filed so that you can use it to apply for, or to be eligible for this grant. So that's the 23rd of April is the deadline for that. If you haven't filed your 1819 tax return, do it now, but you will expect to get a penalty for late filing, and of course you'll have to pay the tax on any income profits that you made.
Yeah, so bearing in mind the end of the tax year is rapidly approaching. Sunday's the end of the tax year, isn't it? Is that Sunday? I think so.
Yes, Sunday.
You want to be returning that money before then, right? If you're not going to take the money for the lessons, and you'd be better to return it to the parents now so that you can prove that it's been lost in this tax year.
I don't think it necessarily has to be lost in this tax year. You have to have lost income as a result of COVID-19. It doesn't specify that it should be in the 1920 tax year. Bearing in mind this grant scheme is being assessed in June, then I think if you can vouch that you've lost money, that's the key point there.
Right, brilliant. Sorry, Phil, did you have something to say?
Yes. If you then Matthew, if HMRC do grant you your 3 months 80% income, is that taxed?
Yes. So the 80% income grant is a compensation for your lost revenue. So if you think about it in terms of the revenue you would have had, that would have been taxed. So the compensation for that loss will be treated in the same way that income would have been treated.
Yeah, and we've seen, I think, a couple of questions about the people who you've mentioned already, if they've got slightly more than the 50% on PAYE. Have they got any recourse during this period? Or do you think it's likely to be any changes coming?
Well, if they're more than 50% on PAYE, then of course they're entitled under the job retention scheme, provided their employer is doing that. Now, I don't know if schools are going down that route. If you're a teacher in a school, I don't know. Everybody's contract is different. And by the way, that job retention scheme does include 0-hour contracts. So if you've got a 0-hour contract with a school and you're on their PAYE system, then potentially you could be claiming under the job retention scheme. But everybody's contract is different, and I would urge anybody in that situation to contact your school and ask them, can you be furloughed under the job retention scheme?
Thank you.
We've got a question here, which is, we sort of touched on it earlier, but perhaps we could talk about it in more detail. What if my average monthly profits this year were due to be more than in previous years? I've lost a lot of playing work this year due to the virus, but in previous years I worked less due to caring duties. Can you take it just on this last year, or does it have to be over the 3 years?
So the income support is based on the last 3 years, from what I understand. So it would be an average across the 3. Of course, lots of us are able to say that this year was promising to be a good year, as in the 1920 tax year. And of course, this has happened, and that's the way it's been. But the income support is there to support your lost income, and it's got to be based on something. So the information that the revenue have at hand now is anything up to the 18-19 tax year. Of course, you've got until the 31st of January 2021 to file your 19-20 tax return. So bearing in mind they're assessing this in June, the likelihood is they won't have the tax return information for this current tax year to base it on. So unfortunately, it's got to go on the information HMRC have got.
Yeah. Okay. Perhaps one last question, and I think this one probably is for Phil, I think. This is a question from Rachel, who says, how on earth can I deal with especially parents and students who are not prepared for the level of communication and effort required from the basics, opening emails, consenting, RSV, etc., to completing assignments, to reporting issues, to putting a lamp on the table? These are the only things causing problems for me, but sadly they are deal breakers. This is a barrier to online teaching, of course. They are also in themselves creating an unmanageable workload for her. How do we persuade people to try teaching online, learning online? What would your answer to them be, Phil?
Oh, that's an impossible answer, I think. Well, it's a learning curve for both sides of the teacher and the pupil stroke parents. It's a massive learning curve, and while many teachers are getting to grips with the technology, it's got to be the same for the parent pupil, and the relationship between the parent pupil as well when it comes to working from home, because it's not just technology, it's pupils' lives are very well structured. They have a school life, they have a timetable. There's that sort of inbuilt authority there, and being at home is different. So it's very, very hard. So I think unless the child is really interested and really wants to do that and is really self-disciplined, which is fine for some, I think on the whole, you're just going to have to work really hard with the parent to try and bring the parent round to your expectations. And there's got to be a bit of compromise as well. It's a difficult one, but keep talking, keep trying. That's the only thing I can say. I'm sorry.
I've also found with some of my students that when this initially happened, they were still at school. So the school was sending a big workload every day. They're having lots of homework in, and then they were, were they going to fit in an online violin lesson at the same time? Do you know what? It's one thing too far. But now it's officially the holidays and they're sitting there doing nothing. A lot of parents are now thinking, oh, please, some structure to the day, or they could learn an instrument. So I'm finding that there is definitely a sort of people are getting used to lockdown. They're getting used to these online options. This won't be the only thing they're doing online. And you might find that it's worth reapproaching them in a week's time, or even this week, and saying, perhaps I could just meet and say, hi, this doesn't cost you anything. I'm just sort of checking in, talking about music, keeping the relationship going. And then take it from there, perhaps. I think that. Do you think, Steve, that's a good idea?
I was thinking, going back to, I think it was our first webinar a couple of weeks ago, that idea that a short taster session that is not being charged is a really good way of getting the parents and the student involved. Because let's face it, I think any parents are going to be happy to have something that isn't costing them. And I appreciate that the point in that question about the extra paperwork or e-paperwork that they've got to do. But I guess with all new technologies, it's going to be there. Once they've got some of the students online, done the forms, it will get easier. But it is a big workload. I mean, I don't know how everybody else is finding it, but I've spent more time in front of the computer in the last 2 weeks than I normally do, and I normally spend quite a lot of time in front of a computer.
Thank you so much. That's all we've got time for tonight, but please keep sending your questions in to us. Phil, the email is
support@estastrings.org.uk.
Great, and we'll endeavour to answer all of them as quickly as we possibly can. Two questions from Steve and Phil.
No, it's Phil. I'm passing over to Phil for a little announcement.
Right.
Just to lighten everything, maybe, perhaps.
After all the talk of heavy finance and all the techie problems we've been running past you for the last few weeks, we thought we should demonstrate our ability, or lack of it, as an ESTA team. We suddenly realised a few weeks ago that Sheila, Ingrid, Steve and I form the Perfect String Quartet. We've never played before, never rehearsed. But a couple of days ago, we got our smartphones and tablets out and recorded something in our own homes. Steve stitched it all together, and it's going to be performed as a world premiere, live on, well, not live, recorded, released at 7:45 on YouTube. There'll be I think all the ESTA members have been sent a link, but there'll be something appearing on the ESTA Facebook account. Please go and click and share and enjoy. The important thing about it is that we didn't use any fancy tech equipment. We didn't go out and spend thousands of pounds on microphones. We used our smartphones. And so, you know, you'll be able to tell that. But I think the point is you can have a lot of fun using tech. So we thought if we can do it, then you can do it. So perhaps next week we'll talk about what you can send in.
Yeah, we're looking forward to your contributions.
and comments.
Nice comments, please. Yes.
Oh, of course we will, Phil. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us. It's been brilliant to have your expertise here today. And of course, as always, to Phil and Steve. And we'll see you next week at 7 o'clock. We're going to be here throughout the COVID-19 scenario, here to answer your questions. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.